Hey everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And check it out, we're at Mecaglisse Raceway in Quebec this week for the Ford Raptor event. This is the 2017 Raptor, second generation for this vehicle. A little bit wider than the F-150, which we had a chance to drive around. My question this week, is it worth going to this more hardcore off-road worthy version of the F-150 pickup truck? We're here to put it through its paces on these icy raceways. Let's see how it stacks up. That's this week here on Family Wheels.
It could be okay, right?
Not bad, certainly enough room to fit. So here's the thing about the Raptor. At first blush, if you just look at the numbers, you might think to yourself that this is going to be a very similar truck to the traditional F-150. It shares the same 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine now. Gone is the V8 that was in the previous generation. It shares this same 10-speed automatic transmission. It's got exactly the same interior. Dimensions are the same, fit and finish is the same. A couple of little things that change it here on the interior, but for the most part, you'd have a hard time differentiating between the two. But then hang on a second, look a bit more closely, and this 3.5-liter EcoBoost has been tuned to give you a much higher output, 75 more horsepower come out of the Raptor than in the traditional F-150. This 10-speed automatic transmission goes through 6 possible drive mode functions, from normal driving scenarios all the way up to Baja mode, where you've got not just the transmission acting differently, but also the throttle response, also the transfer case, how the 4x4 acts. You've got all these different functions for weather mode, when you're in more wintry driving conditions like this, all the way up to the more insane modes like sport mode, if you really want to sort of turn off the traction control and get a little bit nuttier. This truck really is purpose built for flying through the desert or zipping around ice tracks like we're doing here today. It's 6 inches wider than the normal F-150. It's got Fox shocks on board, over 13 inches of travel in its suspension system. We've got a special exhaust system off the back end, so as you're departing a real, hardcore rock face or a bog, you're not going to rip out the exhaust because it's actually built right into the back bumper. A lot of clever little touches in this vehicle, but it's still weighing 500 pounds less than the previous generation of the Raptor. It's also far more composed than I was expecting. I'm out here on the highway right now. I've taken a little break from the track to see how it would do on the road too, because let's be honest, most of us, most of the time, are going to be driving this thing on the road. And even here on these windy country mountain roads in Quebec, I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of bob and weave as I'm ducking through the corners. It feels a lot like the regular F-150, maybe a little bit softer. You get a bit of a different engine note because it has been tuned so much differently than the normal 3.5-liter EcoBoost in the F-150. But other than that, it doesn't feel like I'm driving some great big beast of an off-road car, despite the fact that it does have off-road Raptor-specific tires that have been designed specifically for this truck. You are going to find, though, that there is a little bit more road noise in here than you'd be used to with the regular F-150, which is incredibly quiet for a pickup truck. With these special tires, I'm averaging about 71 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour, and that's definitely on the noisier end, and that has a lot to do with this more throaty engine that's on board, too. Now, considering all the kit that's gone into this truck, all of the R&D, all of the off-road pedigree that we're seeing here in the Raptor, keeping all that in mind, it starts off at what I think is a pretty reasonable $70,000. Because this is such a capable truck. You could go off and run some of the hardest off-road courses and races in the world with this vehicle off the shelf. The thing is, though, that the extras add up quickly. We've got $20,000 worth of additions thrown into this Raptor that we're testing here today. A lot of extra creature comforts, panorama sunroofs, blind spot monitoring, wraparound 360-degree parking cameras, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, the price is $90,000. You want to think about that wraparound camera with this truck, though, because since it is 6 inches wider, one of my beefs with it is that it does make it difficult to drive on narrower roads. If you're looking at parking it somewhere on a tight parking spot, this thing's going to be jammed into the urban environment. But in the country, we've been lucky enough today to have some of the best race car drivers in Canada get behind the wheel of this thing. I was sitting in the passenger seat for a while, and they just danced around the ice course in this truck. We've got paddle shifters now coming on the Raptor, which is a first ever for a pickup truck. It means you can gear into the corners really nicely, and the truck levels out around those corners, blasts through mud puddles. It is an absolute beast. And yes, there are cars like the Ford Focus RS or the Subaru Impreza that can whip around one of these tracks beautifully as well. But here's the thing, I've got a 5.5 foot box still. You've got the option of either a super cab, which is a bit shorter, or this huge super crew cab, which I've talked about in the F-150 before and have absolutely raved about. You've got a very comfortable drive on the highway, and this truck, if you're towing, can still tow up to 8,000 pounds of stuff as well. That's a big boat, that's a big trailer. If you're kind of the person who likes to have this more intense off-road look, but you're not getting off-road a lot, you still get that. If you're looking for a towing truck, you still get that. And if you're looking for something that can be one of the finest off-road vehicles in the world, off the rack, you're getting that too here in the Raptor. But while it's all well and good that you still get the Super Crew, you still get the Sync 3 infotainment system, you still get the creature comforts that you would in the regular F-150, one thing that I don't love about this truck, I've talked about it in previous reviews that I've done as well, is the fit and finish here on the interior. It goes for the Raptor as well, and when you're spending $70,000, $90,000 on a vehicle, these cheap plastics, I just don't think they cut it, and I was disappointed to see that in some way the Raptor wouldn't help deal with those. For that matter, sprucing up the regular F-150, making it a bit more competitive with what I think is a far better interior on the GMC Sierra, would take it a long way. Now, this 10-speed automatic transmission, this is a big deal for Ford because they've spent a lot of money on it. They have had transmission issues in the past with their vehicles, and they also want to try and make the F-150 and the Raptor for that matter a little bit more fuel efficient too, to fall in line with what's required from the EPA. I was worried that this truck would feel a little bit scatterbrained with this 10-speed, that it would search for gears a little bit too much and that it would really affect the way that the Raptor drives. But it's not the case. It's smooth, it's smart, it skips gears when it needs to. It brings the revs way down so that when you do get onto the highway in this truck running in 9th or 10th gear, its fuel efficiency for a big sport tuned truck isn't as bad as I thought it would be. I was expecting not to like this transmission, but I've driven it in the regular F-150 now, and I've driven it here in the Raptor. Both of them perform really well with it, and it's made the truck even better for 2017. Well, while my time in the Raptor may be done, the next time I see you, we're going to continue our time here at Mecaglisse at the Ford Performance Camp with that car right behind me, the Ford Focus RS, a car I am super excited about because I've always had a hot spot, or a soft spot, for hot hatches. This car can work for families, and it's amazing around this track. So let's see how that one stacks up next time I see you, probably about 4 or 5 days from now, here on Family Wheels. Thanks for tuning in.